How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Beis, Daf 92 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends, your friends. Okay, today we're going to start at a Mishnah. We're going to get until the next Mishnah, which is on Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph. I have a feeling it's going to be a long one. But it's a good one too. Longy but goody. Alright. We're going to start on Daf Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph, about 4 or 5 lines into the Amud. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Ochel poyol kishos. Okay, a worker can eat cucumbers. Ooh, enjoy. You know it's a very you want to know it's a really good snack? Cucumbers and trina. It sounds very simple, but it's mind blowing. Afilu b'dinar. So even if the cucumber is a dinar, right? Meaning, even if it's a very expensive cucumber, he's entitled. Koseves, he can eat a date, a dried date. Yeah, I bought some dried dates, I think yesterday. They're very good. They're hit or miss. The place where I go, the dates are hit or miss. When they're good, they're amazing. When they're not amazing, they're just like whatever. The thing is, when they're amazing, you can eat them in 2 days. When they're not amazing, it takes a whole month. Which, from their perspective, if they would just get it more consistent, they would sell so many more of them. Anyways, but maybe it's not so easy to get consistent dates. I don't know. So a date. If you're eating a date, even if it costs a dinner, you could eat it. Elazar Chisma Omer, says Rabbi Elazar Chisma, Lo yochal poyol yasser al scharo. So Rabbi Elazar Chisma says, look, you can't, the worker can't consume more than he's being paid, right? If he's being paid, I don't know, $100 or whatever, he can't eat $150 worth of stuff. V'chacham matiran. Chacham say that it's okay. No, he can eat whatever he eats, even if it's more than they're paying him. He's eating more than he's making. But we do kind of make it clear to the person, look, while there is no limit, technically, on how much you can eat, if you eat too much, people aren't going to want to rehire you, right? If people know that, if you hire this guy, he's just going to eat all your stuff, there's not going to be anything left, well, nobody's going to hire you again. So we just kind of give some good advice, which is do kind of be, I don't know what the right word is, but I don't know, be reasonable. If you eat too much, it's going to be hard to find work. Says the Gemara, Chacham anu Tanakam. The Chacham said, so the Gemara says that the Chacham is saying the same thing as Tanakam. What did Tanakam say? You can eat these cucumbers, these dates, even if they're really expensive, you can eat them. Then we have Rabbi Elazar Chismo says you can't eat more than you're making. And then the Chacham say, yes, you can. So basically the Chacham are saying the same thing as the Tanakam. So Chacham manu Tanakam, Ika benayu, there's an afkamina aval melamd. Well, by the Chachamim in the Seifa, they throw in another bit, which is that we kind of educate the person that if you eat too much, it's going to be difficult to find jobs. The Tanakama leisle melamdin, the Rabbanan islu melamdin. That according to Tanakama, it doesn't say anything about giving this good advice. Whereas the Chacham in the Seifa say we do give such advice. Alternatively, Rav Asi. The nafkamina is Rav Asi. What does Rav Asi say? Rav Asi afilu lo sachro ela livtzor eshkol echod ochlo givaldi. So Rav Asi says that even if the guy was hired just to harvest one cluster, and you know what he did? He ate it. Alright, so meaning he's allowed to eat while he's working. So he says, alright, this is the cluster. He says, alright, I'll get to work. He gets to work and he eats it. So I feel even if he's hired only to eat one cluster, he can eat it. To harvest one cluster, he can end up eating that cluster. From Ravasi, it says Ravasi, right? Let's say he's got a whole row of grapes, let's say, that he's got to harvest, and he gets to work and right away he starts eating. He doesn't wait, doesn't figure, hey, let me first harvest a few before I start eating. He gets right to it and starts eating. So in both of those cases, it is acceptable. Now, therefore, I think it's the Tanakama who would hold of Rav Asi and say that these scenarios are acceptable, and the Chachamim in the Seifa would say that we would not do this. Wait, what? Oh, no, that's something else. Yeah, I think that is correct. I don't think that Rashi... Oh yeah, Rashi does say Tanakama Isle de Rav Asi. Yeah, so Tanakama holds of Rav Asi, and the Chachamim say not. Alright, fine. Alright. Okay, fine. Alright. So now says the Gemara, Utsricha, we needed both of those scenarios. The scenario of when he's hired to harvest just one cluster and he eats it, as well as with the scenario where he's hired to harvest the whole row and he just starts eating right away. If we would only have the first case, the case when he's hired just for that one cluster and he eats it, I'll say, why is that allowed? Mishum dileko lemesov lekelyoy shel bal habayis. Well, there's nothing else to be harvested and given to the bal habayis, right? Meaning, the worker shows up, he says, all right, well, I'm allowed to eat while I work, aren't I? So he gets to work and he eats. Okay, it's not, okay, and there's nothing left. I mean, if there was something else left, he would have given that to the bal habayis, but there wasn't, so he's allowed to eat while he works. But in a scenario where, let's say, there's a whole row in front of him, I might think that he should not just get to eating right away, but rather he should do a little bit of work first. So therefore, we need the second scenario also to say that no, even in such a scenario where there's a whole row ahead of him, he can start eating right away. And if we would only have the second scenario where there's a whole row ahead of him and he can start eating right away, the efshir l'kiyume livasof. Because why is that allowed? Because okay, fine. So even if he gets started and he starts eating right away, but okay, fine. But he's going to finish eating soon, and then he's just going to get straight to work with no distractions. But in the first scenario where there's literally just one cluster and he's going to eat it, and there's not going to be any just pure work going to the bal habayis after that, I would say that's not okay. Therefore, we need both cases to say that taka in both cases the worker is allowed to eat, even if he's only hired for one cluster, or even if, and also in a scenario where he's got a whole bunch of work ahead of him, but he starts eating first. Man, the sun, I think it must be a summer thing. The sun is coming straight through the window, I think bouncing off the floor and right into my eye. Dag nabbit. I really don't think that there's anything that I can do. I think in the past I've maybe taken a towel and put it on the floor or something. This is schwer. Should I just move somewhere else? I don't really want to. Wait, let me think for a second. Alright, I just changed the angle, but I'm probably going to be less comfortable now. Should I get more comfortable maybe? But at least, I'll be more comfortable in that the sun won't be in my eye, which is really good. Maybe I can get more space. 1 second. I think this should be fine. Alright. Yeah, and at least the sun won't be in my eye, that's a big win. Alright. Fine. So, okay. So Rav Asi, afilu livtzor. Okay, fine. Where are we? Is that, that's good. Okay, where am I? Okay, okay, fine. Okay, where am I? Okay, Ibai Sema, alternatively. Ika benayu, another nafkamina between the Tanakama and who else? And the Chachamim. The Rav, the opinion of Rav, the Amar Rav says, Rav Matzosim Megillas Sisarim Bei Reb Chia, that I found a Megillah Starim. Who can tell me what a Megillah Starim is? Well, Chaver, it's super interesting what a Megillah Starim is. It's extremely interesting. We've seen it before. Well, Rav says that he found Reb Chia's Megillah Starim. So it was Reb Chia's. Reb Chia was Betzim a student of Rebbe. Rebbe compiled the Mishnah. What was the big chiddush of the Mishnah, obviously? Well, up until Rebbe, Mishnayos weren't written down. They were all oral. It's the Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's the oral Torah. You're not allowed to write it down. And it was literally in Reb Chia's generation that after, I don't know, how many, thousands of years, I guess, it was finally allowed to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. So I guess you can imagine that I don't know what you can imagine, but the point, I guess, the point is that the old traditions were still strong, and therefore, Reb Chia. So what did you do back then? What would you do before Rebbe? I mean, Rebbe was the end of the Tanoim. So I don't know, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda. I mean, they were living pre-Mishnah times. They were living in times when you didn't write things down. You didn't write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. So what do you do? So says Rashi, Megillah Starim, Megillah Tmuna, scroll that was hidden, Lefisha Osir Lichtov Halachis, because you're not allowed to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. And when he would hear Epis, and he wanted to make sure that he remembered it, and he was nervous he would forget it, he would write it down, but because you're not allowed to write things down, he would then hide it, so that nobody should find it. Right? Because, you weren't, as a policy, you weren't allowed to write things down. But I guess it sounds like it was okay to just kind of write random things down, but not to create a whole corpus. So that was this Megillah Starim. So says Rav, Matzos Megillah Starim be Reb Chia. I found this Megillah Starim by my uncle Reb Chia. And it says in it, Isa ben Yehuda Omer, says Isa ben Yehuda, called Kisava B'cherem Re'echa, that when the pasuk says that when you go into your friend's vineyard, Bebias kol Adam hakos medaber. Do you hear this? That part, it says Isi ben Yehuda, that pasuk of Kisava b'cherem re'echa. So we understood it to be referring to a worker, that if a worker is working in a vineyard, he's allowed to eat from it. It says Isi ben Yehuda, no, it's not talking about a worker, it's talking about anybody. Kol Adam, bebias kol Adam hakos medaber. Anybody can just go and chaparan, can go and eat from your field. Rav says that's insane. Now everybody just let it just go. It's a free flow. You can just take whatever you want. Rav Ashi says, that I said over this teaching of Isi before Rav Kahana, and says Rav Ashi that he suggested, that Rav Ashi himself suggested, well, maybe what Isi was talking about was volunteers, ba'atzim, meaning you're walking by somebody's field and you see that there's gishmak grapes, and so you can't just eat them, right? They're not yours, they're somebody else's. What you can do is you can volunteer, be a unrequested volunteer, right? You just, right? A guy's got workers working his field, and you just decide I'm going to work the field too, because after all, workers can eat, right? Workers are allowed to eat. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be a worker too, and then he can eat while he's working. So maybe that's what it's talking about. Not that you could just take somebody's grapes, but you can just go and show up and say I'm here to work and start working and eating. So Omar Li, and if Kahana responded to me, but still that's still undesirable. Afilu achi nichale leinish laoger agure v'niktefe lefardese. Says if kind of look, at the end of the day, still a person, somebody who has a field would much rather hire workers to work the field, velo nesu kuliyama ve'ochle, rather than just the whole world just showing up and saying, oh yeah, I'm working your field and eat, that's shtickle hefker. So still that doesn't really seem very desirable. Kasha poil mishalo ochel o mishal shamayim ochel. This shaila is going to take us until the end of today's daf. This is the big shaila. So again, ibaylu de asa kasha poil mishalo ochel. So when a worker is allowed to eat from the field, right? While he's working, he's allowed to eat. So is it mishalo ochel? Is that kind of like a bonus, right? He works, he makes an hourly rate or whatever it is. and then there's like a bonus, right? Anything that while he's eating, he's allowed to eat, and that's considered like kind of like extra payment. It's like part of the payment is that there's the hourly rate plus whatever fruit, whatever you eat. It's all considered part of the payment. Or no, it's not like an extra. It's not payment. It's almost like matna. It's like kind of like matnos aniyim. It's like leket shichachon peya, right? There's certain parts of the field that are allowed to be eaten by others, and the workers have their own sort of category of like a worker who's working a field is entitled. It's like a certain matana. It's like mishal shamayim. Right? The Eibishter kind of gives it to him to eat. L'man nafkamina, what's the difference? The Omar tenu leishti uvanai. Well, the nafkamina is, if he says, hey, how about this? I'm not going to eat these fruits. Give it to my wife. Give it to my kids. So iyomad bishalo ochel. So if you say if it's betzim a bonus, it's like it's just like another part of the payment, another line item on his pay slip. Well, yeah, okay. So you could say, look, you know what? Don't give it to me. Give it to my wife and kids. So we give it to them. But if it's from Hashem, well, he's the one who's working. He's the worker. He's the one who gets the special matana, not anybody else. The Eibishter gives it to him. The Eibishter wasn't mezaka these things to them. It's to the worker. He's the worker. So what do we say? Is it Mishalo Ochel or is it Mishel Shamayim Ochel? Tashma, come in here. Ochel Poel Kishos. Okay, so the Mishnah had said that a worker. I didn't tie in that thing earlier. Oops. There was that whole thing with Isi ben Yehuda. Yeah. Oops. Quick. There was that thing with Isi ben Yehuda. That's what it was, right? Yeah. Isi ben Yehuda had said that anybody can just kind of show up and eat from the field. So the Tanakama at Dafka said Ochel Poil, that Dafka the worker is allowed to eat from the field, not anybody else. Whereas the Chacham could potentially say that could agree with Isi. Okay, fine. Sorry. Now back to where we are. My Toshma, come in here. Ochel Poil Kishos. So a worker is allowed to eat cucumbers vafilu bedinar, kosevets vafilu bedinar. That the worker can eat from the field, even if it's a very expensive schayr, even if it's a very expensive cucumber, very expensive date, he can eat it. It's okay. Now, so now, if you say that he's eating, right, that it's like a bonus kind of thing, does that make any sense? Oger bedanka ochel bezuza. Sachakol is getting paid a danka. A danka is 1/6 of a dinar, as we know, or 1/6 of a zuz. A dinar and a zuz are the same. So he's getting paid a danka, and yet he's eating 6 times that amount. Well, that's what. So we're saying that if it's a bonus, meaning he's getting paid a danka, yet they're then giving him like, he's entitled to like a bonus that's 6 times is what he's getting paid. That doesn't make sense. Although my understanding is that in the world of bonuses, that's exactly how it works. The base salary is one thing, but the bonus is where it's at. But al koponim, the Gemara says that it wouldn't make sense that like, he's getting paid one thing and then like this additional payment, which seems kind of like a secondary thing, is actually could be 6 times the amount. We're saying that wouldn't make sense. So what? So you're saying that therefore it must be that he's eating Mishel Shamayim, but why does that make anything better? So at the end of the day, Ogir Bedanko, Ochel Bezuza, at the end of the day, it's still the same weird, strange scenario. He's working for a danka and yet he's eating 6 times that amount. I don't care whether it's Mishelo Ochel, I don't care whether Mishel Shamayim or Ochel, it's still a pretty peculiar scenario. But what do you have to say? Rachmana Zachile. Hachanam Rachmana Zachile. Meaning, the Eibishter says that this is what happened. This is what's allowed to go down, and therefore, regardless if it's Mishelo Ochel or Mishel Shamayim Ochel, That's exactly it. He can eat whatever he eats, even if it's expensive. So meaning it's not necessarily a proof either way. Fine. Tashma, come in here. Rabbi Elazar Chisma Omer says, Rabbi Elazar Chisma lo yocha poyol yoser al scharo. A person should not eat more than he's being paid. Okay, if he's paying $100, if he's being paid $100, he shouldn't eat $150 worth of produce. The Chacham say it is permitted. My labakim, if we let's say that this is punkt machlokes, the Marsover Mishalo hu chel, that the Rabbi Elazar Chisma says that Mishalo ochel, that it's considered like a type of his payment. In which case, the assumption is it wouldn't make more sense that he would be able to eat more than he's being paid. Whereas the Chacham say that he's eating Mishal Shamayim, and the Mishal Shamayim says that whatever you eat, even if it ends up being more expensive. Lo, we say no. No. Everybody agrees that it's his. They're arguing about how to understand the word kinafshicha in the pasuk. Right? It says kinafshicha savecha. You can eat kinafshicha like your soul. What's the drush of like your soul? My sover kinafshicha b'davar shemoser nafsho alav. That what's nafshicha? It's the thing that you are moser nefesh for. That potentially even risking your life to do risky jobs to get, which is your salary. And therefore, kinafshicha means like the equivalent of your salary. That is how Rabbi Elazar Chisma learns it. Whereas the Chacham learn out something completely different from kinafshicha. Manavshicha, it's a drasha that we've seen before. Manavshicha im chasamta pater, just like if you muzzle yourself, if you prevent yourself from eating from your field, that's okay. Apoil im chasamta pater, also apoil, if you ended up, if you prevented it from eating, you'd be pater. So, okay, so it's a completely separate drasha. It has nothing to do with saying that you can only eat up to the amount that you're getting paid. No, but Rabbi Elazar Chisma does learn it that way. Tashma, come in here. Nazir sha'amar, if you have a Nazir, a Nazirite. Now a Nazirite is working in a vineyard. Okay, you have a Nazirite working in a vineyard. Now obviously he can't eat the grapes. So he says, you know what, can you give it to my wife and kids? Okay, Nazir sha'amar, a Nazir who says, Tnu li'ishti uvanai, I can't eat the produce, but give it to my wife and kids. Ein shomin lo, we do not listen to him. But if we say mishalo ochel, that the right to eat the fruits is his, it's his money, so why don't we listen to him? Why don't we give it to his wife and kids? So it sounds like it isn't considered his. So you could say no, it is considered his, but also mishum lech amarin ein nizir mishum lech amarin nizir schar lechaim lo sikrav. This is a nazir thing. I think, right? I think it came up in nazir, right? That basically we say to the nazir, get out of there. Why are you working in it? It's a fine. We basically fine him. We say, hey, you're a nazir. You're not allowed to eat grapes. You shouldn't be working in a vineyard. So therefore we fine him. And so technically speaking, you could say, yeah, a person should be able to give the fruits to his wife and kids. But particularly here, it's unacceptable that a nazir should be working in a vineyard. So therefore we say specifically here, we're not going to sort of make things easy for him and facilitate giving his fruits to his wife and kids, since he can't eat them. We're not going to help him out at all. Tashma, come here. If a worker says, give it to my wife and kids, ain't shamila, we don't listen to him. Okay, so now, if we say mishalo ocha, that he's eating his, that it's his, these fruits are his, amayin shamila, why don't we give it to his wife and kids? After all, it sounds like he's just a regular worker. So my poem nazir. No, that's also talking about a nazir. Who's the worker in that case? A nazir. V'atanya nazir, v'atanya poel. Wait, why are you saying that it's a nazir? One brisa specifically says nazir, the other one just talks about a worker. So it would imply that when it's talking about a nazir, it would say nazir. And if it just says worker, it means a non-nazir worker. Where am I? So Midi Gabe Adode Tanyan, to which the Gemara answers, well, it's not like they were taught right next to each other. It's not like they were like two adjacent brises. One of them said Nazir, the other one said Poyol, and it's like, well, okay, so clearly one's a Nazir, one's not. No, they're completely separate brises. So, I mean, in completely separate contexts. So, like, one of them explicitly said Nazir, and then the other one didn't explicitly say Nazir, but like, you know, they're both talking about Nazirs nonetheless. How do we know that by a poil, by a worker, if he says, give it to my wife and kids, give the fruits to my wife and kids, we don't listen to him? Shenemar, as it says, that it says you can't put it into your own private vessel. It's not for your own private benefits. You can eat it while you're working. It's not for anybody else. Nazir. And if you're going to say, oh yeah, this is also talking about a Nazir, and that's why you're not allowed to give it to your wife and kids. But if that's the case, but if that's the case, then the reason for preventing him from giving it to his wife and kids was mentioned because you can't put it in your own private vessel. But if we're talking about a Nazir, then it should not have been that pasuk. It should have been lech lech amar nazir schor schor lechem lo sikra. So it sounds like from the fact that we're bringing the proof from the pasuk, and it sounds like we're not talking about a Nazir. We say, you know what, Taka. Maybe it arguably should have. It is talking about a Nazir, and yeah, maybe you're Taka right. It should have mentioned lech lech amar in the Nazir, but where am I? So enochinami, but va'aydi de katoni la beloshin poyol kanosiv la kra de poyol. But because in that pasuk we don't mention because in that brisa we don't mention a Nazir explicitly, we refer to him as a poyol, so we also use a proof of a poyol. Ve'al yichalositein. If we were talking about specifically a Nazir, so then we would have mentioned lech lech amar the Nazir. Is that the phrase? Yeah, Amar Nazir schar schar l'chaim lo sikra. If we mentioned a Nazir explicitly, then we would have said that. But because we're referring to him as a poyol, so therefore we mentioned the pasuk that refers to a poyol. But the truth is, it is talking, in fact, about a Nazir. Tashma coming here. Okay, so we're still trying to figure out by a regular person who's not a Nazir. Is it considered his stuff that he can then give to his wife and kids, or is it considered the Eibusher stuff, and he can get benefit from it, but nobody else? Tashma Kamanir, Asoicher es apoyol liktos beteinim. If a person hires a poyol, a person hires a worker to lay out figs on the field to dry him out. Okay, so he's allowed to eat, right? These aren't completed yet, they're not yet chayiv in Trumas and Maiser, so the worker is allowed to eat from them. Geschmack. That sounds like a great gig. Laying out figs to dry, you can chaparain. That means they're not dried figs yet, they're fresh figs. Probably very, very geschmack. That's a good job. He doesn't have to separate Trumas and Maiser. But if he makes a deal with the balabayas that, yeah, I'm going to work the field, but under the condition that I can eat as well as my son, or that my son should eat, from my payment, all right, instead of me, I guess. Who ochelu pater? Well, I guess that's some kind of payment. Who ochelu pater? So the worker is allowed to eat, and he doesn't have to separate Trumas and Maisus, okay? Because he's a worker. Uveno, but his son ochel v'chayev. His son can eat because it was part of the stipulation, but he would have to separate Trumas and Maisus. V'yamit mishalo ochel b'no amay. But if we say that it's his, so then he should be able to give it to whoever he wants. Why does he have to separate Trumas and Maisus, the son? The reason why the son has to separate Trumas and Maisus is because since he's not a worker, he's not working the field, and it's just part of like a stipulation, a deal that was made with the balabai. So it's like a lekach, it's like a mekach, it's like a purchase, right? We learned the other day that a lokeach in a field would have to separate Trumas and Maisus. That's why he has to separate Chumas Maisis. Tashma coming here. Hasoicher es hapoil lasos beneter revai. This is going to be the next Mishnah. This is a Mishnah we're going to get to tomorrow. That if somebody hires a worker, but they're going to be working with neter revai. Neter revai is the fruits of the 4th year. Now, the fruits of the 4th year, you have to bring to Yerushalayim and eat there, or be paid them onto money. But sort of by default, you can't eat them right away. So if somebody hires a worker to work with neter revai, well, they can't eat it because it's neter revai. But what if he didn't let them know? Surprise! He hires the workers. They get to the field. He says, "Oh, by the way, it's neter revai, so don't eat it." And they're like, "What? Are you kidding me?" Like, I guess they were assuming, they were planning on like eating while they were working. Maybe they didn't bring lunch or whatever. So since he didn't let them know, podo machilon, he has to redeem it. Be podo, transfer the kedusha onto money, and then now they can eat the fruit. Now they can eat it, and so then they do have food to eat. Now, if we're saying though that this entitlement to the fruits is Mishel Shamayim, that's not a form of payment, but it's Mishel Shamayim. Amai podo machilon. Why does the Balabayas have to redeem them and feed them? Isura lo zachlu rachmana. Since it's neter revai, if it's min shamayim hu ochel, so then they're simply not. This matana, this gift from the Eibishter wouldn't apply if it's neter revai. If it's a form of payment, so fine. If he didn't tell them, so he has to redeem them so that he can pay. They deserve it. It's part of their conditions, part of their benefits. But if it's shamayim hu ochel, well, in this case, you don't ochel because it's neter revai. So we say, no, the reason why he has to be poded, you could say that it's Mishel Shamayim, so why do you have to be poded? Because otherwise, because it looks like mekach tos, it looks like it was a mistaken deal, right? Meaning, these guys show up at the field and all of a sudden, he says, oh yeah, by the way, it's neter revai, you can't eat it. So they say, hey, wait, if we would have known that it's neter revai, we wouldn't have taken the job, right? So because it's like they were hired under sort of not above table, if that's a phrase, not very transparent circumstances. So therefore, it seems like mekachtos that they were hired under mistaken with mistaken sort of understandings. So therefore, that is why it needs to be that the neter revai said they can eat. Ema Seifa. So this is coming from the next Mishnah, right? This is coming from the next. Basically, the rest of the daf actually is based on things from the upcoming Mishnah. So Ema Seifa. So it says in the continuation, Nisparsu igulav. If he has fig cakes pressed, right? Figs, a bunch of figs that are pressed together, but they come apart. So he has to hire workers to press the figs again. Now they don't necessarily know that it's again, right? He just says, I'm looking for workers to press figs, right? So, okay. But anyways, if you have these fig cakes that kind of came apart and now they need to be repressed, Nispatchu chav Yosef, or if you had barrels of wine that opened up and now they had to be resealed. So the workers who are hired to do these jobs, they can't eat while they work because since they were already made into fig cakes, which is the final product, they're already chayiv in Trumas Hamaisus, so they can't eat it. Additionally, the wine is already chayiv in Trumas Hamaisus, so they can't drink the wine while they're working. But if he didn't let them know that, by the way, these are things that are already chayiv in Trumas Hamaisus and you're going to be unable to eat, mutter ma'aser. So then, right, the point is that they're tevel right now, so he has to separate Trumas Hamaisus so that they can eat while they're working. And if you're going to argue that it's Mishel Shamayim Mu'ochel, so then Amai Ma'asur Ma'chilan Isur Ma'chilan. Why does he have to tie them so that they can eat? Isura lo zachilu achman. If it's mishal shamayim ochel, well, if it's chayv in meiser, well then the gift does not apply in that scenario. So why does he have to tie the wine or the figs so that they can eat? If it's mishal shamayim, it doesn't apply here. Well, the same reason as we said in the previous case by the neter avai, which is that otherwise it looks like mekach tos, because they're going to say that, well, we didn't know that these things were chayiv, that were already chayiv meiser, and that we wouldn't be able to eat it. But bishlam and isparsu igulav mechzik mekach tos. So I understand that argument when it comes to the fig cakes that came apart. Because what did he say to them? He says, "Look, I'm looking for workers to press figs together." And they say to themselves, "Oh, pressed figs, that sounds great. They're not yet chayiv chumas and meisus. We'll press figs together. We'll eat figs. It's going to be great." And then they show up, and it turns out that they were already pressed into figs, but they came apart. I.e., they're already chayiv chumas and meisus. Now they can't eat. So I understand why that can be mekach tos. But elo nispatchu Rabbi Yosef my mekach tos ika. But what kind of mekach tos is there when it comes to barrels of wine, right? He says to them, "Look, I have barrels of wine. I need to seal them." Meida yade, they already know. Oh, okay. There are barrels of wine. They're already chayiv in meiser. So, what kind of possibility for mekach tos is there? Rav Sheshes says of Sheshes shenispatchu chavios of libor. Well, says of Sheshes, what happened was the wine barrels didn't just open up; they also spilled out back into the pit that they were being stored in. And therefore they weren't actually in the barrels. But 1 second, we learned in the that once the wine is already in this pit, I don't exactly know what this pit is. I think maybe it's that they step on the grapes and crush them, and then the wine goes into this falls into this pit, and then I think at some point it gets transferred from there to, I guess, barrels. So at that point, once it's in this pit, it's already chayiv in Chumas and Meisus. So what difference does it make that it spilled out back into the pit? Still, it would already be chayiv in Chumas and Meisus. Well, Ki Rabbi Akiva, it's like Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Misha Yakpe. Or Misha Yikape, maybe. That it's from the time that you skim away the seeds and peels and things from the top of it. I think after a certain amount of time, these things kind of float to the top, and then you skim them off. So therefore they figure that it wasn't yet skimmed, and therefore it was not yet chayiv in chumas and meisus, and that they would be able to get fashniket, they would be able to drink from it. The amrulei lo avi adinon, that they say, look, we didn't know that it was already skimmed. V'nemelu, but why doesn't the Baal Bayis say to them, well, you should have thought that maybe that could have been a possibility, no? Well, you should have thought about it. Dilma mikpa, maybe it was already skimmed and chayiv in chumas meisus. Well, ba'asra ta'u gaved denogid iu makpe. That well is in a place where it's generally the person who takes out the wine from the pit is the one who does the skimming. So they figured that they would be the ones doing the skimming, and therefore it would not yet be chayiv in chumas meisus, and they would be able to drink wine and get fashniket while working. That sounds like a gevaldige inyan. And then they show up and it was already skimmed, and now they can't get fashniket, and they say, "Come on, we would have worked for somebody else where we could have gotten fashniket." V'hashta the Tani Rav Zvid b'devei Rav Oshaya, and now the Rav Zvid taught by the BavaMetzia Rav Oshaya that yayin mishayered lebor v'yikope, that when that wine is chayiv in chumas meisus, once it goes down into the pit and is skimmed. Rabbi Akiva Omer says, Rabbi Akiva mishayash lebechavios. It's not yet chayiv in chumas meisus until the wine goes into the barrels and the foam on top of the wine is removed. At that point, it is chayiv in chumas meisus. Well then, well then we don't even need to say that it's talking about, like Rav Sheshes said earlier, that it's talking about where the barrels opened up and spilled back into the pit. No, they could have just stayed in the barrel, right? Because Rabbi Akiva just said that it's only chayiv in chumas meisus once it's in the barrel, and at that point the foam has been removed. The amrulei, that the workers say to the Baal Bayis, lo ava yadina, and we didn't know demashle, that the foam was already removed. V'nemelu, let him say to them, Hibayluchu asuki adataychu dilma mashle. Can't he say to them, well, you should have thought that maybe it could have already been, the foam could have already been removed. Be'asu daud desharik hahu mashle. Well, it's in a place where generally the person who is going to be sealing the barrels is the one who would be removing that foam. Therefore, they thought that they would be the ones to do it and that they would be able to drink from it, and therefore it would be a mekachtos, a mistaken sort of arrangement, and that is why the balabayas would need to separate Trumas Maisos from it so that they would be able to drink it, because otherwise it might be a mekachtos. Okay. Now we're on the final push till the end of the daf. It's not going to be super simple. Tashma kaminir. Kotzetz odom ayidei atzmo. Okay. So a person can make a deal with the balabayas that, hey, I don't want the fruits, I want you to pay me money. He could do the same if his adult children are working. He could say to the balabais, look, they're not going to be eating any fruit, just pay me the equivalent in money, to me. Or his adult eved or shifcha, or for his wife. Because in all these cases they're adults, and they have da'as, they have knowledge, they have intellect, and if they weren't okay with that, they would say something. But he cannot make such an arrangement for his children who are minors, or not for his eved or shifcha who are minors, or not for his behema, because they don't have knowledge to be able to say, hey, I'm not okay with that. So if they're minors, he is unable to say to the balabayas, hey, they're not going to eat, instead pay me the equivalent in money. So now, and the assumption is that this father, who's trying to make these arrangements, that the father is supporting them. He's paying for their food, and therefore, since he pays for their food, he's entitled to their ma'aseh yodayim. He's entitled to receive the benefit of their work. So I can understand this. Oh, this, by the way, is also, it's the Mishnah, also in the Mishnah that we're going to get to tomorrow, right? So, because later on we're going to see a brisa, right? So this is, in a few minutes we're going to see a brisa, and then the Gemara is going to start talking about the Mishnah and the brisa. This is the Mishnah. Right now we're talking about the Mishnah, okay? So, it makes sense in this Mishnah if we're saying that these fruits, the entitlement to these fruits is Mishal Shamayim, is from God, and it's not Mishalo. Well, then, so we're saying that he's paying for their food, which means that he's entitled to their Maaseh Yodayim. So if it's Mishalo Ocha, if it's considered monetary, well then he should be entitled to this payment. He should be able to make a deal with the Balabayas and say, hey, they're not going to eat, instead pay me, because he's entitled to that money. But if it's Mishal Shamayim Hu Ochel, but if it's not money, if it's a gift from God, well, that gift goes to the worker and not to him. And therefore, that is why we're saying, look, for the adults, he can do whatever he wants, because if they're not into it, they could protest. But we're saying for the minors, he can't make this deal, because since they don't have das, so we just have to rely on the defaults. And by default, if we're saying, right, so we're saying that he's not allowed to tell the balabais, hey, pay me instead. Now, if it's mishalo, if it's just money, then he should be able to say, pay me instead. So it must be Mishal Shamayim Ocha, and that belongs to the kids, not to him. And that is why by the minors he can't make the deal. By the adults he can, because if they have a problem they'll just say something. But by the minors, where they don't have das to say anything, by default he can't make such a deal because it's Mishal Shamayim Ocha. So again, so Bishlam or Mishal Shamayim Ochel. So this makes sense if you say Mishal Shamayim Ocha Mishum Achi Eino Kotzetz. That's why he can't make the deals for the minors, because it belongs to them, not to him. But if we say that it's his, that it's just considered money, like a kind of bonus to the work, well then, if he's supporting them and he's providing them with food, these kids, well then he's entitled to the Maaseh Yodayim. So Ketanim Nami no Kutzlu, then he should be able to make a deal with the Balabayas for the Ketanim that instead that they won't eat, and instead the money will go to him. So therefore we want to argue that it's Mishal Shamayim U'ochel, which explains why he can't make a deal for the kids. So Achav Mayaskinon B'She'ein Ma'leloin Mizonis. No, here it's talking about where he doesn't pay for their food. And because he doesn't pay for their food, that is why he's not entitled to, right, so since he doesn't pay for their food, so they are entitled to their own Maaseh Yadayim, and therefore he can't make such a deal. If that's the case, Gedolim Nami. Well, if that's the case, then he shouldn't be able to make a deal by the adults either. Gedolim Yadei V'Kamachle, but as we said, he could say whatever he wants with the adults, because if they have a problem, then they'll just speak up. But what about the following Brisa? So that was a Mishnah. What about the following Brisa? Now the only difference in this Brisa, I'll tell you right now, the only difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa are with regard to Avodim and Shvachos Ketanim. All the others are the same. So, Vatana Rabbi Oshaya, fine. Vatana Rabbi Oshaya, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Oshaya says, okay, a person can make a deal for himself, and he can say to the Baal Abayis, say, I won't eat anything, just pay me money. Or for his wife, but not for his behemah. And he can make a deal, right? He could work something out with the Baal Abayis to pay him for the work of his adult children. But not for his minor children. Okay. And he can also make a deal to get paid himself for his evident shifcha knainis bein gedolim ve'ketanim, regardless of if they are gedolim or ketanim. So there is a discrepancy between the Mishnah, where it says that avodim and shvachos who are ketanim are just like his own children who are ketanim, that he can't make a stipulation to get paid, that they won't eat and he'll get paid instead. But in the Brisa it says that by his evident shifcha ketanim, right, whether they're gedolim, whether they're ketanim, he can make a stipulation. So my lab, idi v'idi b'maylo and mizonis. Well, let's say that in both cases, both the Mishnah and the later Brisa, both the Mishnah and the Brisa, is b'maylo and mizonis. Is when he's providing the food. So he's providing the food. Okay. And therefore, if he's providing the food, so he's zocheh to their Maaseh Yadayim. Uvaka miflage, and here's the machlokas between the Mishnah and the Brisa. To myself mishalo ochel, that in the Brisa we're saying mishalo hu ochel, that it's considered money, and therefore since he's paying for their food, he's entitled to the Maaseh Yadayim, and therefore he can make a stipulation for the evident shifcha ketanim, because he's zocheh to, right? So he's paying for the food, he gets their money. Umar savar mishal shamayim ochel, but in the Mishnah the assumption is mishal shamayim hu ochel, and therefore it belongs to these kids, and he can't touch them. Lo, no. D'chulei alma mishalo hu ochel. No. Both the Mishnah and the Brisa assume mishalo hu ochel, that it's money. Okay, so if that's the case, then how come in the Mishnah he can't make a stipulation for the kids? Well, the Mishnah is talking about where he's not ma'aleh mizonos, he's not paying for their food, therefore he's not entitled to the money of the kids. And the Brisa is talking about when he is paying for their food, and therefore he's entitled to their work. Okay, fine. So we're saying that the Brisa is talking about where he is. Wait, where am I? Let me just make sure I didn't get lost because it's super confusing. Yeah, okay. So we had just said that the Brisa is talking about where it's mishalo hu ochel, right? So it's considered money, and in the Brisa it's talking about where he's ma'aleh mizonos. Therefore, he can make a stipulation for the for these minor avodim. So if that's the case, ketanim nami. No kotzlu. Well, if that's the case, his own children who are ketanim, he should also be able to make a stipulation about. In the Brisa, we had said that he can only make a stipulation by the avodim who are ketanim, but not by his own children who are ketanim. But if we're talking about where it's mishalo ochel, so it's considered money, and we're talking about bishamayla and mizonos, where he's paying for their food, therefore he's entitled to their work, and that's why he can make a stipulation for these eved minors, we should be able to make a stipulation for his own kids who are minors as well. So tzarayu divno vito ketanim lo zachi lerachmana, he doesn't have he doesn't have the zchus to the tsa'ar of his children who are ketanim, meaning if they're going to be working, their entitlement to eat is not something that he's able to take away from them. Okay, so then we had said that our Mishnah is talking about where bishalo ochel, that is considered money. So then why can't he make a stipulation about his kids? Because it's b'she'ein ma'ila and mizonos. Well, because he's not paying for their food. He's not supporting them. If he's not supporting them, so then he's not entitled to their food. Or he's not entitled to their money. So that makes sense, right? So we had said in the Mishnah that is evident shivcha who are ketanim, because he's not paying for their food, he's not zochet to their ma'aseh yodayim. But that assumes that that's true. That when an adon is not paying, is not supporting, is not paying for their food, well then he has no right to their work. But that's taka machlokes. So Nichel man de Omar ein Rav Yochel lomar leeved ase imi ve'eni zoncha. So according to opinion, he says, an adon can't say, look, I'm not giving you food, and also all the work that you do goes to me. He can't say that, because then how's the guy going to survive? So Shabbos, so if that's the case, then that makes sense. Okay, the Mishnah is talking about that, right, that even though it's mishalo ochel, even though it's considered money, but because he's not supporting them, he's not entitled to the ma'aseh yadayim. But El Lamando Omar, Yochel Arav Lomer le'eved aseimi v'eni zoncha ma'ikal le'meimar. But according to the opinion who says that, as crazy as it sounds, an adon can say, I'm not supporting you, I'm not paying for your food, and also whatever work you do goes to me. Well then, ma'ikal le'meimar. So then in the Mishnah, if we're saying that the money is his, mishalo ochel, and he is not supporting them, but still he could say, give me your money. So why does Mishnah say he can't say that? So elo idi ve'idi b'sha'ein ma'let loen mizonis. Okay, so rather both the Mishnah and the Brisa is talking about where he's not paying for their food. Uva pligi, and here's the machlokes, the ma'asavar yochol, u'ma'asavar ein yochol. Okay, and simply the machlokes is that in the Mishnah where it says he's not allowed to make the stipulation, it's because that's according to the opinion that Mishnah is like the Mishnah is like the opinion who says that an adon who is not paying for food has no right to the ma'aseh yadayim of the eved. And the Brisa, which says that that he can make the stipulation for the avadim who are minors, is like the opinion who says that even if the adon is not paying for their food, he could still say, I'm taking your ma'aseh yadayim. Rabbi Yochanan the Amar Yachol Arav Shavak Masisim Vavud Kibraisa, but then in fact the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is like that latter opinion. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that an adon is allowed to say, I'm not paying for your food, and also give me your ma'aseh yadayim. I'm taking the payment for your work. So if that's the case, so Rabbi Yochanan, when faced with a Mishnah and a Brisa, he's holding like a Brisa. Well, Mishnayos are stronger than Brisas. So why would he do that? Or, he wouldn't want that. That wouldn't make sense. Oh, okay. So now we're saying that both, according to the Mishnah and according to the Brisa, it's taka mishal shamayim hu ochel. Okay, that it's not right that the right to the fruits is not considered a payment; it's considered like a gift from Hashem. V'lo matzi kotzitz. Umay kotzitz, ulo matzi kotzitz, right? And therefore, if it's mishal shamayim, so then he has no right to them, right? Obviously, you can't tell the balabayis, okay, pay me instead. I mean, it's not payment; it's something that the worker is entitled to. But we say, so umay kotzetz, domer boshaya, then what does it mean in the Brisa? When it says that by these minor avodim, he could be kotzetz? It doesn't mean that he has access to the fruits, because he doesn't. Right? Only the worker has it. It's min shamayim ochel. No, but what it means is my kotzetz, it means mizonis. It means that the adon could work out with the balabayis in advance and say, hey, pay me some extra now, and I will buy food to feed this eved in advance so that he won't be so hungry while he's working, and he won't eat so much, and it works out better for you. That's what it means, kotzetz. It's not that he could say, the Maisi Yodayim go to me, or that these payers go to me. They're min shamayim ochel. They're gifts from God. They don't belong to the Adam. What kotzetz means is that he could work out a deal. He can make a deal with the balabais that, hey, balabais, give me some money now. I'll buy some food. I'll feed him before he goes to work. He won't eat so much of your stuff. That's what he's allowed to do. But if so, the kavasa gabi behema tevin nikotzla. But if that's the case, we said in the Brisa we had said that he's not allowed to make the stipulation for his animal. He can make the stipulation for his eved who's a cotton, but not for his animal. But if we're just saying that it's talking about, hey, give me some money and I'll feed it in advance so that it won't eat so much while it's working, why can't you do that for an animal? So Ela kamifligate myself mishalo ochel myself mishel shamayim ochel. Boom. Rather say that the Brisa is saying mishalo hu ochel, that it's his, and therefore he can make the stipulation for the eved. But the Mishnah is talking about bishel shamayim ochel, and therefore he is unable to make that stipulation. Cool. Just to make sure I said it right, that in the Brisa we're talking about mishalo ochel. He can make the stipulation. In the Mishnah we're talking about mishel shamayim ochel. Therefore he cannot make the stipulation. Shnekis, that was a complicated daf. Wow. What did we even what were we even talking about on this okay. Right, but we're talking about this right, this entitlement to be able to eat from the while you're working, and ultimately we got to this question of, right, is this considered mishalo ochel, mishashamayim ochel? And it seems like it's taka ashtikal machlokes, but the Mishnah though seems to be assuming mishashamayim ochel. All right, peace out.